today I have an amazing guest. I think you guys are really, really going to enjoy our session today. I have Dr. Izabella Wentz, and she's a pharmacist, author, and thyroid health expert who specializes in functional medicine. And if you're listening, I know you know all about functional medicine. She was diagnosed with Hashimoto's and has since made it her mission to help others with thyroid disorders. She's written 4 books. I told her offline that I've written 1 and I can't imagine writing anymore. And her 4th book is the one I have in my hand right now. And I want you all to go get it. It's called Adrenal Transformation Protocol. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So welcome, Izabella. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dr. E. Thank you so much for having me.
So tell me a little bit about, so Adrenal's book number 4. So tell me a little bit about that journey of how we got from thyroid to adrenal and why we're here.
Oh my gosh. So I've been talking about adrenal health for as long as I've been talking about thyroid health. It really started with my own healing journey. So I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's in my 20s after some symptoms, as a functional medicine practitioner that, you're going to be exhausted, you're going to be irritable, you're going to have a fatigue, brain fog, and just kind of like a really suppressed vitality, right? Along with it, many people will have digestive issues and they'll have pain in their bodies. I initially started with all the things in my 20s and finally got a diagnosis of Hashimoto's. And being a pharmacist, I was like, hooray, I get to take medications, right? The medications, they helped a little bit, but I went from sleeping like 12 hours a night to 11 hours a night, from wearing, 2 jackets in Southern California to only needing 1, in the summer.
Improvement, yay.
That was a big improvement. But at the same time, I still had my carpal tunnel syndrome. I still had acid reflux and irritable bowel and just like a whole bunch of symptoms where I felt like my body was breaking itself apart, including hair loss and just extra weight. And so I started doing some research, my own research, right? To think about, is there anything I can do to help myself feel better? And I came across functional medicine and lifestyle medicine. And initially I got off of gluten and dairy. And I was like, I'm not going to do this. This doesn't work. I'm just going to prove everybody wrong that this doesn't work. Right. And I hate to tell everybody, being a Polish girl that was eating her pierogi and her bread and all of that, within 3 days, all of my symptoms of the acid reflux and irritable bowel syndrome, I was like, and carpal tunnel, I was like, where is my pain? Where's the reflux? Where's my bloating? And it was incredible what a dietary change can do. And then I was like, okay, this is going to fix everything. And as time went on, I was like, okay, I think I hit a plateau. I'm still tired, still have the brain fog, trouble waking up in the morning, still kind of anxious. And that's never fun, right? And I have unrefreshing sleep. And then somebody, people kept talking to me about adrenal fatigue. I was like, let me do a Google search and see more about it. And this was 10 plus years ago. So the websites were like, it doesn't exist. I was like, right. Oh, it doesn't exist. Well, I'll just try something else. Maybe I'll put some coconut oil on my thyroid gland. Spoiler alert, it made my skin on my neck very beautiful, but it did not heal my thyroid, right?
Surprise topical application didn't work.
Yeah. And then I finally, the 15th person mentioned adrenal fatigue. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a try because I had all the symptoms. And sure enough, holy cow, I felt so much better. And what I found over the years is that most people with thyroid issues have some sort of adrenal issue. And in order to feel like you're thriving and getting rid of all of your symptoms and having tons of energy with a thyroid condition, you need to support your adrenals as well.
Oh my God, you said so many things that I want to unpack. This was so great. So the first part I want to unpack, and I say this all the time, is that all of us in functional medicine have either been sick ourselves or someone that we love is sick, right? I got into it because my wife was sick. And right, so you went to pharmacy school, which is a really long time. I already went to, I was already in FNP. My wife's a physician assistant. So you think you're done with school and you know everything. You know the algorithm, evidence-based practice, everything. And then you get sick. In conventional medicine, which is great, I'm not anti-pharma, but it has its limitations. And until you hit that wall, you don't start to explore. That's the first thing I want to say. Every single provider that any of my listeners are, whether it's me or Izabella or anyone else, we have a story. And there's a reason we got here. We got here from personal journey for now until it becomes more conventional. So I really love that you said that. And then, but the second thing I wanted to unpack, oh my God, there's so much, this is so great, is that, you know, we all want the one thing that will fix it, right? So, oh my God, I'm gluten-free, dairy-free, this should fix everything. And then people feel better, but without question, while nutrition is so important, and I won't even work with someone who doesn't, you know, willing to change their plate, there is more. It's never just one thing, and it's layers, and it's really exploring those layers and getting as good as you can feel with the nutrition, and then going to the next level and the next level. And for you, it was adrenal. For someone else, it might be mold, etc. But I love that. I love that this is where it took you. So with that in mind, now that we know how you got here, and I always like to make it, you know, for all listeners, so everyone's kind of on board. So if you think you're adrenal, great. But if you think you're not adrenal and something else is going on, that's okay. Keep searching. There's always more than one thing. So tell us about this protocol. What is it?
So absolutely. And so just for anybody listening that might be wondering if you have adrenal symptoms or not, it's going to be the brain fog. It's going to be the fatigue, weight gain when you don't want to gain weight. You might feel wired but tired. You might feel like you have trouble sleeping at night. You might be disconnected from the circadian rhythm. You might be standing up and you feel faint. You're going to be sensitive to lights, have salt cravings, addiction to like dependence on caffeine in the morning to get you going. Sometimes people will have need wine or something alcoholic in the evenings to kind of, you know, suppress their racing mind and to help them fall asleep. And so these are all these symptoms, and people are like, okay, these are such common symptoms, right? But are they normal, right? And so, no, they're not normal. This is what happens when the body's been under stress for a long period of time and you go into this survival mode, right?
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm a big interrupter. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
I love this. I love this because what happens is it's so normalized, right? To feel unwell. I don't feel well, but everyone around me doesn't feel well. Oh, must be my age, must be my hormones. And we kind of accept this suboptimal, oh yeah, of course I need to drink wine to unwind. Of course I need coffee, right? It's glorified, it's commercialized, and it's normalized. And so we start thinking that living this way, feeling this way is normal. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, but continue. I'm sorry. I just had to say it.
No, absolutely. Thanks so much for saying that, because so many people go on and they don't realize that they don't have to feel that way, that they can feel powerful and fit and calm and have amazing energy, no matter what age they are, right? I started having these issues in my 20s, and people were telling me that I was just getting older, right? And I'm 40 now and I feel better than I did in my 20s, right?
Amen. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, I'm 51 and I feel better. Yeah. Yeah. Because I practice what I preach.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm 51 and I feel better than I ever did, and definitely feel better than many of my peers, because I've really refused to accept that this is part of aging. Are there certain things? Sure, that I can't do, but not the unwellness, not the constant aches and pains, not the exhaustion. That is not a normal part of aging. It's normal. We've accepted it. We've normalized it, but it's not part of it. So glad you said these things. And you know, I jumped and I went to what is the protocol. I'm so glad you stopped and said, what is it that you feel? But before we even jump to the protocol, do you know why there's so much resistance to this being a real diagnosis?
I think it comes from like the naming convention, because the name is like adrenal fatigue from like integrative practitioners kind of coined this term for this syndrome where people were like depressed and anxious, and it was like a cluster of symptoms. And it kind of sounds a little bit like Addison's disease and adrenal insufficiency, which is an autoimmune condition that destroys the adrenal glands. And then when 90% of the adrenal glands have been destroyed, people do need supplemental hormones to live and to survive. And so a lot of times people will go to their doctors that are conventionally trained and will say, like, I think I have an adrenal issue. I read about this. And then the doctors will test them and be like, no, you don't. You don't have Addison's disease. And they used to think that it was like a mild version of Addison's, where your adrenal glands were not able to produce adequate amount of stress hormones. Now, as kind of more research has been done, the mechanism of action of what's going on with that stress syndrome has become a lot more clear. And we've realized now that it's like the adrenals are capable of producing stress hormones in the right amounts at the right times, but they're not doing it because there's a communication breakdown between the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So it's like the brain and the adrenal glands are not communicating correctly. And so we don't get the right release of hormones throughout the day, but we can absolutely get back to that healthy, thriving state, without hormones within just a few weeks to get yourself feeling amazing. If you do the right thing, you send your body the right signals.
And I can't wait for you to tell us what that is, but this is how I explain it to my patients, because we do adrenal fatigue testing in my office all the time. I'll say, hey, listen, you could bring this to your endocrinologist. I'm just letting you know, they're going to tell you that it's not real, because in conventional medicine, your adrenals are either completely over functioning or completely under functioning. Both of them are probably landing you in the ICU.
Absolutely.
Right. But there's nothing in between. Apparently there's no spectrum in between in conventional medicine. Everything else, it's either completely perfect or completely off or completely on. So, and since you can clearly see how that's not logical, but that's why it doesn't recognize it. They only recognize the extremes. So tell us a little bit more about this non-extreme version that is completely debilitating, but doesn't land you in the ICU. What's actually happening in our bodies? Why is this happening to us?
Usually it's like a prolonged period of stress. So we have our adrenal glands that produce our stress hormones, and they help us survive, right? And so if we get like in a situation, everybody hears about like the woman or the man that gets like superhero power to lift a car off of like a child, right? And you get this like amazing boost of energy to help you through surviving, whether that's being chased by a bear or a really stressful situation. And ideally, that's kind of the acute stress response. You go there and you prioritize making cortisol, you suppress production of other hormones, you stop growing your hair, you stop the digestive process, and then you go through that process and then you kind of shake it off. You go, you get out of the threat, and then your body realigns itself, right? You sleep it off, shake it off, whatever the case may be, and you go back to having that balanced state. But what happens for a lot of people in modern times, when we have so many different stress signals coming, not from like the bears, right? But sometimes from the news, or sometimes from, kind of negative thought patterns inside of our own heads, from drama, from trauma. And sometimes, from a functional perspective, it's our lifestyle, or it's chronic hidden infections or exposures that essentially send these messages to our body that we're not safe. And then we get into this survival mode.
Yeah. And so then what happens? So we're constantly releasing for a while, right? So for a while we're over releasing. Tell us about the stages.
Oh, absolutely. So in the initial stages, people will usually have like a high cortisol state. So I know a lot of times if people are tuned into like conventional media, they'll hear like cortisol's bad, right? It's like, oh, it's bad when
cortisol's bad. Cortisol makes you fat. That's a big one that people say.
Oh,
like,
yes.
What are you saying? Yes. I'm so glad you're bringing this up, because it makes me crazy.
It does. And it's like, it's a hormone that we require for life, right?
Yes,
and we need to have it in the right amounts. And so in the early stages, and I feel like a lot of us maybe hear about this, where people are like, you're under a lot of stress, so you have lots of cortisol, and this absolutely happens, right? And so we'll store belly fat, and we kind of feel like we're wired, or we, just drank 6 to 8 Red Bulls and we're just irritable and we can't sleep. We're anxious. We have like this huge to-do list. I think of it like rock stars in a hotel room, right? Just going all in, right? And as time goes on, the body's like, okay, we cannot be in this high cortisol state.
We cannot sustain this.
Oh, absolutely. It's very damaging, right? And so the body will say, you are stressed out. I hear you. I see you. I appreciate that you're stressed out, but we cannot have all this cortisol happening. So the communication pathway breaks down. So yes, you sense the stress, but either the receptors or the feedback loop just gets impaired. And then the body will start dropping cortisol levels. So initially what happens is people might have blood sugar issues, blood sugar swings. They might have mood swings because they start off with high cortisol in the morning, but then they'll have a dip in the middle of the day, and they go up, and it's like, you're anxious, you're irritable, you're tired. And then they go up, and then they're like, okay, I feel better again. And sometimes if the up happens too late in the evening, they're going to have that wired and tired feeling and they can't sleep, even though they're like ready to sleep,
Yeah.
right? Oh,
I just want to say this. So for our listeners, so much was just said right now, right? So that first initial stage could be for years, by the way, that stage where you can get it all done. So you might say, there was a time in my life where I could just get it done. I worked, then I went to school at night and I fed my 3 kids and I ran a business. And you're like, what happened? Is it because I'm getting old? No, that time in your life when you were like level 10 at all times was actually not a healthy time for you. And
Yep.
it was never meant to be sustained, right? So the body was supposed to do that temporarily. It was not designed to be able to do that forever. And so what's happening with your body is that it's like, sorry, ma'am, sir, we can't do this anymore. We can't produce at this level. Some people might experience this as burnout. Like, hey, because now you lose kind of that drug that you were on, this cortisol drug to get you through. And now the same demands might be coming of you. Maybe you're seeing patients, maybe you're seeing customers, and you're like, man, I just can't give anymore. And it feels like burnout. In a sense, it's type of burnout, but it's a chemical burnout. It's like you literally have no more juice to give.
Mhm.
And so that's part one that I wanted to mention. And part two is that so many, and I know you have this also, the women will come to me, right? And they're exhausted. And so what are their PCP says to them? Just go exercise. Go
Oh,
exercise. These women try to exercise and then they need a 3-hour nap because they're exhausted. So now, I mean, women and men, but it tends to be women for me that come through my doors. And now, so now they're not only are they exhausted, but now they have all this negative self-talk about, oh my God, I'm so lazy. What's wrong with me? Susie Sunshine over there is working out and feels energized. And I working out and I need a nap. And I have to tell them, hey, this is actually real. This is a real chemical. You are not lazy. You're in adrenal fatigue stage 3. You have no reserves to get through the day, let alone a CrossFit workout. Right? So tell me about that. Like with the people that walk into you and they're just like, how there's so much negativity they've given themselves because they don't recognize that this is real. This is chemical. It's not laziness.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's such an important message that I want to communicate because in the later stages, it's like you have this burned out adrenal state where you're barely making any stress hormones throughout the day. And these are people with that I see with chronic fatigue syndrome, hypothyroidism, autoimmunity. About 62% of the people that I've worked with, and I've kind of analyzed their patterns, will kind of be in that state. And yes, it's like they don't tolerate stress, and everything feels like an extreme sport for them, right? So like they'll see a
Yes.
person running a marathon and they're like, I walked to my mailbox and I took a nap after that. It's like, and it's just real. And part of the reason why I get so frustrated with conventional medicine, as much as I love it and it can be life-saving for cases like conditions like Addison's and Cushing's, I really want to get the message across that like this isn't in your head. You're not lazy. You're not crazy. Like this is what happens when your body gets stuck in that stress response. And you don't have to live that way. And then there's like specific lifestyle things that you can do. Hint, hint, not over exercising is not one of them to feel
No. Yeah. By the way, that's the name of my book is called It's Not in Your Head, because so many women come in and they're told a version, right? It's in their head. Yeah. So over exercising will certainly worsen it. It's really important to do graded exercise, which for our listeners means whatever you can do. If that means walk into your mailbox and then you're exhausted, guess what? That's your exercise. And walk into the mailbox twice. If you need to nap, that's too much exercise. Graded exercise is really important. And that's why that prescription of like 30 minutes a day, 7 days a week. What is, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you said that as well. So how do we fix it?
So my theory is that what we're going through these days is that we're getting a lot of stress signals, right? And when our body gets too many of these stress signals, it kind of shifts into this survival mode out of thriving mode. And so what I've worked on is giving people more safety signals, trying to take away some of those stress signals to really shift the scale and get back into balance and move into that thriving state. Now, there's a lot of different protocols and a lot of different ways to do this. So I've worked with utilizing hormones to help a person raise their cortisol if it was low or lower their cortisol. with supplements if it was too high. And that's a great way to do that if you're working with a practitioner. But if you're just working on like taking hormones, like you want to address like the root cause, like that stress and those stress signals. So my program and protocol really focuses on things people can do from a lifestyle perspective and really understanding your body. So what are some of the safety signals we could send, and what are some of the danger signals? As we alluded to, over exercising, what does that tell your body, right? Does that tell your body, like, you know, we have these old genes that we're walking around with, right, in our modern days. And if you're over exercising, your body's going to get the message that there's like a herd of tigers chasing you. So it's going to be perceiving that as stress, right? If you are not eating enough calories, your body can get the message of like, I'm in a famine, right? If you're eating foods that are inflammatory for you, you're nutrient depleted, you're not getting enough protein, your body's going to feel like, oh, I'm under stress, right? And so sleep deprivation is another one. If you're kind of like, you know, burning the candle at both ends, you're not getting enough sleep, your body's going to be like, oh, you know, in cavewoman days, we did this when, you know, there was another tribe trying to attack us, right? And so part of that, my plan is, let's focus on eating foods that are nutrient dense, eliminating inflammatory foods, eating like really good food, plenty of food, like not starving yourself, plenty of protein, plenty of fats, to really focus on that blood sugar balance. But balancing blood sugar is one of the most helpful things we can do when we are in state. People are like, I thought I was anxious, but turns out I just had to balance my blood sugar. And then we focus on addressing nutrients that are depleted during this stressed out state. And that just kind of gets people back to, okay, I feel human again, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So first thing, I'm glad you mentioned anxiety. So a lot of my patients will say, oh my, I'm anxious, I'm on anxiety medications, and I'm in no way against anxiety medications. But so the anxiety, two things. One, yes, your sugar could be low, but the other you kind of alluded to earlier, which is when you're exhausted and someone says, hey, can you help me put up the shelf? Oh my God, I can't do it. How am I going to do it? I can't even manage doing, I can't even, you know,
It's
get my
overwhelming.
laundry done, let alone, right? So you start getting anxious because everything feels overwhelming. And when you start feeling better and you have more bandwidth and someone says, hey, can you help me do this thing? You're like, yeah, sure. So it's perceived anxiety for some people because they're just so exhausted. So every task is like, oh my God, how am I adding this to my list? So people's anxiety gets so much better when they do that. And then your suggestion, your protocol, which if you haven't bought the book yet, please go and get it. Okay. I'm not affiliated. I'm just supporting another amazing practitioner. Just get it done. So what I love about what you said is not everyone can work with a provider that knows which supplements or may prescribe hormones. And so many people reach out to me. I'm sure they reach out to you and like, well, this is what it looks like to work with me, but not everyone can do it for various reasons. So one of the reasons I produce content is for people to be able to do it on their own. It sounds like your suggestion of like, hey, let's fix your lifestyle, read this book, fix your lifestyle. You don't even need anyone. You can do it on your own, which I love. And then of course, if you want more, there's always more. And if you're not sure if you have adrenal fatigue, you don't even have to get tested, because what you're suggesting should be done regardless.
Yeah.
Should be done regardless, because guess what? If you have autoimmunity, I'm going to recommend the very same thing. Nutrient dense food, get your sugar in check, get your sleep on. If you just have chronic, I don't feel good-itis and you do this, you will feel better. So if you're not sure and you don't want to go testing and you don't want to do this, you have nothing to lose by trying this. I tell this to my patients all the time, like kind of off topic, but related. In my primary care practice, I have a lot of kids with eczema. And I'll tell the parents, just try dairy-free for 30 days. What do you have to lose? The eczema goes away. Great. If it doesn't, go back to the dairy-free. Inevitably, they come back and I say the eczema goes away. It's one of those things like, what do you have to lose? There's no side effects. There's no downside. If we're wrong, you had a really healthy month. And if you're right, you're going to feel amazing. It's like, there's no downside to this protocol.
Absolutely. Because we're not trying to raise cortisol or lower cortisol. We're really focusing on like adaptogenic strategies that are going to give you a healthier cortisol response no matter what.
Tell people real quick what adaptogens are.
Mm. So adaptogens are a class of herbs and they help you adapt to stress, as the name would imply. And they really help you get balance. They've been studied for conditions like anxiety, for depression, for insomnia that can be very helpful for energy levels, for balancing hormones, and for libido purposes as well. Various adaptogens have different personalities. Some of them, like maca, tend to be more like libido boosting, right? And hormone balancing. And then we have things like rhodiola that may be anxiety, as well as ashwagandha. And the amazing thing that happens is people, like you said, they have a little bit more resilience, a little bit more bandwidth when they get on adaptogens. And other people become less annoying. Other people become less overwhelming, right? It's
Yes.
amazing how that works, right?
You're going to love your spouse again. But the people become less annoying. I love that. It's not that everyone's annoying. It's just that you don't have bandwidth anymore for anyone's, we,
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's like, it's me, I'm the problem here. Like if you're, my kind of rule of thumb is like, you look around and if you feel like everybody is annoying, you look at your dog and your dog is giving you crap. Your mom calls and you're like, why are you bothering me? There's a good chance that like it's something going on with your nervous system, with your adrenals.
I
Really, everybody
love
else.
that. That is so true. And if you have a career that you used to love, and now you're like, if one more person walks in here and says one more thing, and that's not who you were like last year, consider adrenal fatigue, that's what's going on.
So common, career
Yeah.
burnout. And there's so many causes of it too, where it could be purely psychological, or,
Sure.
like we talk about from a physiological perspective, there could be like things like mold in your body could lead to that.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I know it's not kind of the topic, but back to what we were saying earlier, there are levels to why you don't feel well. You start with nutrition, you start with the basics. Of course, if your thyroid's off, you got to fix your thyroid. If adrenals are off, you have to fix your adrenals. These are before you start going, and this is what I wrote in my book as well, before you start going mold testing, Lyme testing, and all these other, get this fixed first. Because even if you do have other issues, let's just say you have a mold issue, your thyroid and your adrenals are not on point, you're not going to be able to manage mold detox. No way. You're not. Yeah. So there are layers to it. So even if you're like, wow, I'm really sure I have mold, I was exposed to it. If you're still eating the standard American diet, you got to get that in check first. It's really important to get that in check. I'm so glad you said it. So tell me, what else would you want to tell our listeners that maybe you haven't told them yet?
I would say just, we've talked about how it's possible to actually feel good and thrive. It's possible to get there within 3 to 4 weeks, no matter what's going on within your body, just giving your body that extra energy boost. I will say one kind of thing I wanted to dispel is people will say like, you have to quit caffeine to heal your adrenals. And that's been a big barrier for a lot of people, like a barrier to entry. People are like, oh my gosh, I'm not even going to go there because like, you're not going to take my coffee away. You're like, going to take away 95% of the sources of joy in my life. Right. So, so I focus on, rather than taking your caffeine away, if that's what's getting you by in during the day, that might be a good reason, because if you have low cortisol, having caffeine is going to help you raise it. And so that's totally makes sense. People self-medicate with that. And people will try to quit coffee with low cortisol and they feel awful. So my program really focuses on raising your energy levels, getting you aligned with the circadian rhythm really, really well. I focus on things like you go outside in the morning, or you get a light therapy box to raise your cortisol naturally. You get some sea salt and some electrolytes in the morning that'll help to raise your blood pressure a little bit naturally. And that kind of gives your body a feedback of raising cortisol. And so you do these habits. Maybe you move your coffee just like a little bit, like maybe don't crawl to your coffee machine. And I'm just speaking from personal experience here, right? Like, but give yourself your body an opportunity to create that cortisol naturally. And then maybe don't drink coffee after 3 if you find that it interferes with your sleep, and you kind of can keep it in a smaller window of time. And it can be really helpful for you to do these other things. And then if you still wish to keep caffeine as part of your life, you're going to have a much healthier relationship with it, where you're not going to be, dependent on it. You're going to be able to like enjoy it and still feel good, right?
I'm laughing because one of the first things people say when they work with me is like, "Are you going to take my coffee away?" And so I have this line. I said, "I'm not going to F with your coffee. That's the one thing I won't F with. Eventually, you might not need as much, but
Exactly.
because when you mess with people's coffee, they're out. They're out. So everyone listening, we're not going to mess with your coffee. That being said, just like you said, I actually say no more caffeine after 1 because it tends to be disruptive. Even though you can't imagine that your 1 p.m. espresso is messing with your sleep, it is, unless you're genetically really, really lucky. Um, and and yeah, there's so much more to it. We've talked about nutrition, but you've mentioned some things. There's so much more to nutrition than just nutrition, and a lot of it is going outside. Your brain needs to know what time of day it is. It really needs to know, because when it knows that it's morning, it's releasing certain chemicals. When it sees that it's not day anymore, it's releasing certain chemicals. And if you're indoors all the time, if you have blackout shades, if your body is not aware of what time of day it is, you're fighting an uphill battle. So there's so much to that. Oh my God, I'm so glad you mentioned that. So tell us how our listeners can reach you or work with you or get your book or whatever it is you want to tell us, how they can contact you.
Oh, absolutely. So my website is Thyroid Pharmacists, and they can get a guide to the ABCs of adrenals at thyroidpharmacist.com/ABC. My Instagram is Izabella Wentz PharmD, and I'm also on Facebook under Dr. Izabella Wentz, Thyroid Pharmacist. And people can find my books on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, wherever books are sold.
Amazing. And a lot of my patients will say to me, like, they're hiding it. They're like, we listened to someone. Is it okay? Like, as if they're like cheating on me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, all rivers, like it all leads to the same source. The more, the merrier. The more providers are talking about this, the more patients have access, the more people, like, maybe the way I said it doesn't resonate, but the way you talk about sunlight resonates. At the end of the day, we're here to get people better. And if you read my book, and Dr. Wentz's book, and everyone, it's all good. It's all one love. Get it. I'm putting it up again. Get it. Go buy it. Read it. If you're better, then we're happy. That's all that matters. Dr. Wentz, Izabella, this has been an absolute pleasure and honor to have you here. I'm so, this was just a great episode. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. What a joy to meet you. And thank you for doing everything you're doing to empower people to take charge of their own health. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.